Jonathan Reese stepped out of his rental car, adjusting the sleeves of his dark gray button-down. No badge, no suit, no entourage, just a man walking into an FBI office like any other visitor. And that was exactly what he wanted. The Atlanta field office stood tall before him, its glass windows reflecting the city skyline. On paper, it was one of the busiest FBI branches in the country. But underneath, corruption, arrogance, a system that had gone unchecked for too long. That was why he was here. Reese had spent the last 20 years fighting organized crime, domestic terrorism, and cyber threats. He'd been in war zones, negotiated with foreign intelligence agencies, and personally led operations that changed the course of history. But now he was facing a different kind of war, one inside his own agency. Reports had piled up, allegations of racial discrimination, cover-ups, misuse of power. Some agents operated like they were above the law, and for years, no one had stopped them. That changed the moment he took the job, but Reese wasn't here to make speeches. He wanted to see the rot up close. So he left the official motorcade behind. No press, no formal introductions, just a man walking in alone. Because the best way to understand a system was to watch it when it didn't know it was being watched. He pushed open the heavy glass doors. Inside, the atmosphere was thick. Agents moved with purpose. But there was a certain swagger to some, a hierarchy that wasn't just about rank, but about power. Reese recognized the type immediately. He'd seen them before. Cops, soldiers, government officials. The kind who believed the badge made them untouchable. The kind who thought they ran the place. And the worst kind, the ones who were about to learn they didn't. Reese took a slow breath, ready. Because today, the game changed. The air inside the FBI office was thick with the weight of unspoken authority. Agents moved between desks, voices murmuring in clipped, efficient tones. Some leaned over files, others tapped away at computers, and a few exchanged quiet laughs in small circles. No one noticed Jonathan Reese, and that was exactly what he wanted. He moved through the bullpen slowly, observing. The way some agents carried themselves, relaxed, too comfortable. The way others seemed tense, watching their surroundings carefully as if they knew they were in the minority. The way conversations stopped when certain people walked by. Power. And who held it? Reese had seen this before. Corrupt police units, broken military chains of command, government offices where power wasn't about rank, but about fear. And now, he was about to see it up close. "Are you lost?" The voice was sharp, filled with mockery. Reese turned. A man stood a few feet away, arms crossed, posture loose but challenging. Agent Daniel Carter. Reese had read his file before coming. 12 years in the Bureau. Multiple complaints of misconduct, quietly dismissed. A reputation for pushing his weight around. And most importantly, a man who thought he had nothing to fear. Daniels looked Reese up and down, his smirk widening. "This isn't a place for people like you," he said, tilting his head. Reese raised an eyebrow, but before he could speak, Daniels stepped closer. "The FBI doesn't hire people who wander around like you," he added, his tone dripping with condescension. The words hung in the air. Nearby, a few agents glanced over, but said nothing. Because this was normal here. Daniels was testing him, trying to gauge if Reese was someone he could intimidate. Reese exhaled slowly, keeping his expression neutral. He had his answer. This office wasn't just broken. It was rotting from the inside, and Daniels, he was about to realize just how badly he had screwed up. The room wasn't silent anymore. A few agents had stopped what they were doing, sensing something was happening. Some whispered to each other, others simply watched. Daniels had an audience now, and he knew it. That was all the encouragement he needed. He took another step closer, too close. Then he spat. The warm, wet impact hit Reese's cheek. The room erupted. Laughter, scattered at first, then growing. Some agents turned away, not wanting to be involved. Others? They laughed right along with Daniels. To them, this was a joke, a game, a reminder of who had power in this building and who didn't. Reese didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't react at all. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a handkerchief, and wiped his face with the same measured calm he'd used in war zones, hostage negotiations, and high-stakes interrogations. Then he spoke. His voice was steady, quiet, controlled. "Is this how you treat anyone who walks through this door?" Daniels smirked. "Only those who don't deserve it." Reese held his gaze for a moment longer. Then he turned and walked away. Just like that. No anger, no threats, No reaction. And that made Daniels laugh even harder. He turned to his colleagues, shaking his head. Pathetic. More laughter. More whispers. No one in that room had any idea what had just happened. No one realized that in the next few hours, everything was about to change. And Daniels, he had just signed the death warrant for his career. The conference room buzzed with casual conversation. Agents leaned against desks, joked, and exchanged glances as they waited. Daniels sat near the front, his feet kicked up on an empty chair, still smirking. Maybe they finally brought someone in to clean house, he joked, nudging the agent next to him. Hope they don't start with me. A few chuckles rippled through the room. No one knew what was coming. The door opened. Deputy Director Philip Henderson stepped in, his expression unreadable. All right, listen up, Henderson called, his voice cutting through the chatter. Today we have a special guest. A pause. Daniels leaned back lazily. Henderson continued. This is the person who will be taking over as the new FBI director for this area. The smirk on Daniels' face froze. He sat up a little straighter. The room shifted. Agents glanced at each other, suddenly paying attention. And then the man from earlier stepped forward. Jonathan Reese. Only now he was wearing a suit. Now he commanded the room. Now they saw him. He walked up to the podium, adjusting the mic with calm precision. Then he spoke. His voice was steady, deliberate. I am Jonathan Reese, a beat of silence. And as of today, I am officially the FBI director of this office. The reaction was instant. The laughter, gone. The smirked clean. The agents froze. And Daniels went pale, because in that moment he understood. He had just humiliated the one man who had the power to end his career. And now he was about to pay for it. The silence in the conference room was suffocating. Daniels felt it like a noose tightening around his neck. Just minutes ago, he had been the loudest voice in the room. Now he couldn't even swallow past the knot in his throat. Every pair of eyes flickered toward him, then away, as if watching a man sinking in quicksand. The same agents who had laughed with him were now pretending they hadn't. Reese, standing at the podium, observed it all with a cold, methodical sharpness. He wasn't angry. He wasn't yelling. And that made it worse. Reese let the weight of his words settle before he spoke again, his voice even but unyielding. I came here unannounced because I wanted to see the real face of this office. He scanned the room, his eyes locking on agents who had joined in on the laughter. None of them could meet his gaze. Daniels' hands curled into fists beneath the table. His instinct was to fight back, to make an excuse, to control the narrative. But for the first time in his career, he had no control. He had already lost. Reese continued, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. What I witnessed this morning was disappointing. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. No one dared to move. Even Henderson, the deputy director, remained motionless, his face unreadable. Daniels could feel the sweat on his back, the way his own heartbeat pounded in his ears. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Because really, what could he say? What excuse could possibly erase the fact that he had mocked and humiliated his superior officer? In front of the entire department, a few chairs shifted as some agents tried to distance themselves from him. The realization was settling in now. This wasn't just a scolding. This wasn't just a bad moment. This was the beginning of the end. And Daniels, he had finally figured that out. Because Jonathan Reese wasn't just disappointed. He was here to clean house, and Daniels was first on the list. Reese let the silence stretch, let them feel it. In his years with the Bureau, he had learned that silence could be more powerful than shouting. Fear didn't come from volume, it came from certainty. And right now, every agent in that room knew one thing for certain. The rules had changed. He stepped forward, resting both hands on the podium, his gaze sweeping over the room. Then he spoke. Let me make something very clear. The weight of his voice sent a chill through the air. Unprofessionalism, abuse of power, racism. Each word landed like a gavel striking wood. None of it will have a place in this office under my command. No one dared to breathe. Daniels shifted uneasily in his chair, but Reese didn't look at him yet. He wasn't done. This is not a fraternity. This is the Federal Bureau of Investigation. A murmur spread through the room. Some agents sat up straighter. Others looked down, knowing they had played along with Daniels for too long. Reese's voice didn't waver. If you think that badge gives you unchecked power, you're wrong. If you think this office will continue to tolerate misconduct, you're wrong. And if you believe your behavior will go unnoticed, you are very, very wrong. Then, his gaze finally locked onto Daniels. The man flinched. The arrogance, the bravado, gone. Now, he just looked like a man who had realized too late that the ground beneath him had collapsed. Reese straightened, his tone turning from warning to action. Effective immediately, Agent Daniels is suspended indefinitely and placed under internal investigation. Gasps. A few sharp inhales. Daniels's face turned pale. Sir, Reese cut him off with a look. Pack your things, Agent Daniels. You no longer have a place here. The words hit harder than any punch. Daniels stared, frozen. No one defended him. Not the agents who had laughed. Not the colleagues who had once backed him up. Not even Henderson, because no one wanted to go down with him. Reese looked back at the room. Let this serve as your first and only warning. The message was clear. The era of tolerating wrongdoing? Over. And Jonathan Reese had just proven it. The moment Daniels was escorted out of the conference room, the real work began. Reese turned to Deputy Director Henderson. I want everything on Daniels, every report, every complaint. Henderson hesitated, just for a second, but one look at Reese's unwavering expression made it clear. This wasn't a request, it was an order. Within hours, Reese sat in his office, a thick file that should have ended Daniels' career years ago. Excessive force allegations. Dismissed. Multiple reports of racial discrimination never followed up on. Harassment complaints from junior agents swept under the rug. And yet, Daniels had kept his job. Not because he was good at it, but because the system had protected him. Reese exhaled slowly, flipping through the pages. Each document was a testament to a culture of silence, a culture where bad agents covered for each other, where complaints got lost in paperwork, where misconduct was excused as tough policing. And Daniels, he had thrived in it, because no one had ever stopped him. Until now. Reese closed the file. Then he made the call. Daniels was fired, effective immediately. His entire case was sent to the Justice Department for prosecution. An internal task force was formed to investigate how he had been protected for so long. The shield he had hidden behind for years, gone. The system that had covered for him, now turning against him. And Daniels, for the first time in his career, he was truly alone. The weight of change settled over the office like a storm cloud. For years, silence had been the unspoken rule. Everyone knew the problems. Everyone saw the corruption. But no one spoke up because they were afraid. Afraid of backlash, afraid of retaliation, afraid of being the next target. Until now. Agent Carter was the first to step forward, a young agent, barely 5 years in the bureau. He stood in front of Reese's office, shifting on his feet before finally knocking. Reese looked up as Carter entered. His posture was rigid, nervous, but his voice, steady. Sir, Carter said, I need to tell you something. Within an hour, Agent Lopez followed, then another, and another. They all had similar stories. I knew Daniels was a problem, but I didn't think anyone would listen. I saw how complaints were buried. I didn't want to be next. I joined the FBI to make a difference, but this place made me feel like I had to keep my mouth shut. Reese listened. Didn't interrupt, didn't judge. When the last agent finished speaking, he stood, and what he said next made the entire room hold its breath. Reese looked them in the eye. If you want to be good agents, he said, his voice firm but even, I will support you. A pause. But if you want to protect corruption, if you want to cover for bad cops, bad agents, and a broken system, his tone dropped, cold and sharp. Then you should leave this organization. The words hung in the air. Because this was the line. There would be no more silence, no more looking the other way. And for the first time, the agents in that room felt something different. This wasn't just about firing Daniels. This wasn't just about punishing one bad cop. This was a new era. And under Jonathan Reese, the FBI was about to become something it should have been all along. By morning, the story had broken wide open. The Daniels case wasn't just an internal scandal anymore. It was national news. Headlines exploded across every major network. FBI agent fired after years of misconduct, new director cleans house. Abuse of power exposed, agent under federal investigation. Atlanta FBI office undergoing major reform. The video clip circulated. Daniels mocking Reese. Daniels spitting in his face. Daniels being escorted out of the FBI building in disgrace. For the first time in years, The public was watching the FBI hold its own accountable, and for the first time in years, people felt something new: trust. A shift in public perception. For too long, communities had seen bad cops, bad agents, bad systems, and nothing ever changed. But now someone had been punished. Now corruption was being dismantled from within. A local Atlanta resident, a retired teacher, spoke to a news crew outside the FBI office. "I never thought I'd see the day when someone in power actually cleaned up their own mess." Another resident, a young black man, simply said, "Maybe now people like me can actually believe in the system." Reese's public statement. A press conference was held. Jonathan Reese stood at the podium, cameras flashing, reporters waiting. His statement was short, clear, undeniable. If law enforcement does not hold itself accountable, it has no right to exist. The FBI is not above the law, and as long as I'm in charge, no agent will be untouchable. The reporters shouted questions, trying to pull more from him, but Reese simply stepped away, leaving the world to absorb his words. Because under his watch, change wasn't a promise. It was already happening. The auditorium was filled. Community leaders, activists, everyday citizens who had spent years doubting law enforcement. But tonight, they came to listen. And at the front of the room, standing behind the podium, was Jonathan Reese. He let his gaze sweep over the crowd before speaking. His voice was calm, unshakable. The FBI is here to protect justice, not to tolerate abuses. A murmur spread through the audience. Some nodded, some crossed their arms, because they had heard empty promises before. But Reese, he wasn't here to promise, he was here to act. He continued, his words sharp and deliberate. "If you feel you've been treated unfairly, speak up. I'll listen." A pause, then a shift in the room, because no one in power had ever said that to them before. No one had ever invited accountability. No one had ever made them believe it was possible. The results: a new partnership. For the first time, human rights groups and community leaders began working with the FBI. An independent civilian oversight board was created to monitor misconduct cases. Public complaints were now tracked and investigated transparently. FBI agents were required to meet with community leaders monthly to discuss concerns. Sweeping reforms under Reese's leadership. Stronger internal oversight. A new division was created to investigate any and all accusations against agents. Mandatory retraining. Every FBI agent, regardless of rank, had to complete an ethics and racial discrimination course. Ending the culture of protectionism. Officers and agents were told, cover for corruption and you're just as guilty. The old way? Dead. The new way? Already taking shape. The final message. Reese looked out at the crowd one last time. And then he spoke the words that would define his legacy. Justice must be protected, no matter who it holds accountable. The room was silent, not because they didn't believe him, but because, for the first time in a long time, they finally had hope. 1 year later, everything was different. The Atlanta FBI office, once a breeding ground for corruption, arrogance, and abuse of power, had transformed into something new, something better. Reese stood in front of the headquarters, the morning sun casting long shadows across the polished glass doors. Behind him, agents moved with purpose, not with unchecked authority, but with accountability, because under his leadership, the FBI wasn't just a badge and a gun anymore. It was a responsibility. The changes were real. Corrupt agents had been removed. The worst offenders, the ones who had protected each other instead of the public, were gone, fired, some even prosecuted. The public's trust had been restored. For the first time in years, people believed in the system again. A more transparent and accountable FBI was in place. Oversight committees, body cameras, zero tolerance for misconduct. The culture had shifted, not just on paper, but in reality. A final reflection. Reese took a deep breath, watching as his new team gathered outside. Men and women who had earned their place here. Men and women who understood that justice wasn't just about enforcing the law, but upholding it. He had come to Atlanta expecting resistance, and he had found it. But now he had found something else. Change. Real, undeniable change. And as he stood there, hands in his pockets, watching the office he had rebuilt, he knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. The fall of Agent Daniels and the transformation of the Atlanta FBI office wasn't just a story. It was a lesson about power, a lesson about accountability, A lesson about what happens when good people stop looking the other way. Because corruption and abuse don't survive in isolation, they survive in silence. What can citizens do? Document and report police and FBI misconduct. If you see something, record it. If you experience abuse, report it. Corrupt officers rely on secrecy. Taking away their cover is the first step to change. Demand transparency in internal investigations. Push for civilian oversight committees to review law enforcement misconduct. Support legislation that makes investigations public and independent. The system can't police itself. Accountability must come from outside. Support victims of abuse in seeking justice. Speak up. Amplify their voices. Protests, petitions, lawsuits. Every action matters. No one should have to fight corruption alone. What should law enforcement do? Eliminate protectionism in government agencies. Officers who cover up misconduct should be held just as accountable as the ones committing it. The blue wall of silence needs to be dismantled immediately. Ensure that every agent is held accountable to the law. A badge should never be a shield against justice. FBI agents, police officers, and government officials should be held to a higher standard, not a lower one. No more cover-ups. No more second chances for abusers of power. The final message: Reese had proven that change was possible. But change isn't permanent. It has to be protected. Because power, unchecked, will always lead to corruption. And justice only survives when people fight for it.